On February 1, 2025, President Donald Trump signed a significant set of executive orders that will reshape U.S. trade relations, particularly with China, Canada, and Mexico. The orders impose a 10% tariff on imports from China and a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, with the new measures scheduled to take effect on February 4, 2025 at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. A key component of these tariffs is the elimination of the de minimis exemption, which allowed packages valued under $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. This change poses a substantial threat to e-commerce giants like Temu, Shein, and Alibaba's Taobao, which have leveraged this loophole to offer low prices to American consumers. Timeline of events: February 1, 2025, President Trump signs the executive orders imposing tariffs. February 4, 2025, tariffs officially take effect at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. Key changes: 1. De minimis exemption. Previously, the de minimis provision allowed for duty-free importation of goods valued under $800. This provision has been exploited by Chinese e-commerce companies, enabling them to sell products at significantly lower prices. In 2024 alone, over 1.3 billion de minimis shipments entered the U.S., a drastic increase from just 139 million in 2015. The Biden administration had begun addressing this exemption in September 2024, highlighting concerns about its overuse and the ease with which illicit goods, particularly fentanyl, could evade customs checks. 2. Economic implications. The rollback of the de minimis exemption is expected to generate additional tariff revenue, which supporters argue may help counter illegal drug trafficking. A senior administration official stated that the exemption facilitates the entry of illicit goods into the U.S., making it difficult for customs officials to enforce regulations. The changes are predicted to lead to higher prices for consumers, particularly affecting lower-income shoppers who have relied on low-cost imports. 3. Adaptations by e-commerce giants. Companies like Temu and Shein have begun adjusting their business models to mitigate the impact of the new tariffs. Temu, for example, has started to ship larger inventories to U.S. warehouses to expedite delivery times, reducing reliance on direct shipments from China. Shein has similarly established distribution centers within the U.S. These adaptations are critical as they aim to maintain competitiveness in a landscape where traditional retailers may benefit from the new tariff framework. Market dynamics. The new tariffs could shift competitive dynamics in the U.S. e-commerce market. Retailers like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, which operate marketplaces and allow third-party sellers to reach consumers, might gain an advantage. As U.S. consumers have exhibited a willingness to wait for lower prices, especially from companies like Temu, these changes may intensify competition among e-commerce platforms. Source reactions. Different sources have reported on the implications of the new tariffs and the abolition of the de minimis exemption. NBC Philadelphia focused on the political context and the broader implications for U.S.-China relations, emphasizing the concerns raised by lawmakers regarding the exploitation of the de minimis provision. Fortune highlighted economic ramifications and the scale of the shipments affected, providing extensive data regarding the dependency of e-commerce businesses on the de minimis loophole. PYMNTS framed the tariffs in relation to combating illegal drug imports, linking economic changes to broader societal issues surrounding drug trafficking. Conclusion. The introduction of a 10% tariff on Chinese goods and the abolition of the de minimis exemption mark a pivotal change in U.S. trade policy. These measures threaten the competitive edge of Chinese e-commerce platforms, which have thrived on low-cost imports and the ability to circumvent tariffs. As companies adjust their strategies in response to these changes, U.S. consumers may face higher prices and a more complex online shopping landscape. The implications of these tariffs will likely reverberate throughout the e-commerce sector, impacting both consumer behavior and the operational strategies of e-commerce giants. The implementation of a 10% tariff on Chinese goods alongside the abolishment of the de minimis exemption represents a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, particularly affecting the landscape of e-commerce. This move, spearheaded by the Trump administration, is aimed at curbing the competitive edge that Chinese e-commerce giants like Temu, Shein, and Taobao have enjoyed in the U.S. market. A counterintuitive aspect of this situation is the potential unintended consequences for American consumers. While the tariffs are designed to generate revenue and combat illegal trade, they may ultimately lead to higher prices for consumers who have benefited from the low-cost offerings of these Chinese retailers. The de minimis exemption previously allowed for the duty-free importation of packages valued under $800, enabling companies like Temu and Shein to undercut traditional retailers by offering significantly lower prices. By eliminating this exemption, the U.S. government may inadvertently push these companies to raise their prices, thus negating the very competitive advantage that has attracted consumers to them. Additionally, the focus on the de minimis loophole as a means to combat drug trafficking, specifically fentanyl, presents a paradox. While the administration argues that smaller packages facilitate the illegal importation of drugs due to minimal customs checks, the reality is that the vast majority of e-commerce transactions are legitimate. The crackdown may not significantly impact the flow of illicit goods but could disrupt legitimate trade and harm lower-income consumers who rely on affordable products from these e-commerce platforms. Moreover, the shift may inadvertently benefit larger U.S.-based e-commerce companies such as Amazon, eBay, and Etsy. These platforms are positioned to leverage the new tariff framework more effectively than their Chinese counterparts, potentially allowing them to capture a greater share of the market. This could lead to a consolidation of market power among a few large firms, which runs counter to the original intention of fostering competition and consumer choice. In summary, the counterintuitive information in this context highlights that while the tariff and the elimination of the de minimis provision are intended to protect American interests, they may ultimately disadvantage U.S. consumers and smaller retailers, creating a more monopolistic market landscape that could stifle competition rather than enhance it. The recent decision by the Trump administration to impose a 10% tariff on Chinese goods and eliminate the de minimis exemption is poised to reshape the U.S. e-commerce landscape significantly. While many discussions focus on the immediate effects on pricing and competition among retailers, several key aspects of this policy change are significant yet may be overlooked by the broader public. 1. Historical context of the de minimis exemption. The de minimis exemption, which has been in place since the 1930s, allowed goods valued under $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. This long-standing trade provision facilitated the explosive growth of Chinese e-commerce platforms like Temu and Shein, enabling them to offer low prices that undercut traditional retailers. By understanding the historical context of the de minimis exemption, one can appreciate the magnitude of its removal. This change is not just a regulatory adjustment, it marks a fundamental shift in U.S. trade policy that could have long-term implications for international trade relationships. 2. Impact on low-income consumers. Many discussions around tariffs focus on their economic impact on businesses and the broader market, but the implications for low-income consumers are critical. The de minimis exemption disproportionately benefited lower-income consumers who relied on inexpensive goods from platforms like Temu and Shein. With the removal of this exemption, these consumers may face higher prices for everyday items, further straining their budgets. The significance lies in the potential for increased economic disparity, as lower-income families may be forced to choose between essential goods and other necessities. 3. Increased focus on illegal imports. One of the administration's justifications for abolishing the de minimis exemption is the alleged facilitation of illegal imports, particularly fentanyl and its precursors. While this rationale has been echoed in many reports, the broader implications for trade policy and enforcement are significant. The focus on illegal imports not only reflects a shift in U.S. priorities but may also lead to increased scrutiny and regulation of e-commerce transactions. This could result in longer shipping times and increased compliance costs for businesses, impacting the overall efficiency of the e-commerce market. 4. Market dynamics shifting toward domestic players. The new tariff regime could inadvertently strengthen domestic e-commerce platforms such as Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, which may be better positioned to absorb the costs associated with tariffs. This shift could lead to a more entrenched market position for these companies, potentially stifling competition from smaller or foreign retailers. The significance of this change lies in its potential to alter the competitive landscape of e-commerce, favoring established players at the expense of emerging competitors who have relied on the de minimis loophole. 5. Strategic adaptation of Chinese e-commerce platforms. In response to the tariff and de minimis changes, companies like Temu and Shein are already adapting their business models, such as increasing inventory shipments to U.S. warehouses to mitigate tariff impacts. However, this strategic pivot may not suffice in the long term, as ongoing tariffs could pressure their low-cost business models. The significance here extends beyond mere adaptation. It may reveal the resilience and resourcefulness of these companies in navigating complex trade environments and their ability to innovate in response to changing regulations. 6. Potential for increased consumer prices. While the direct impact of the new tariffs on consumer prices is a common topic, the broader economic consequences are often overlooked. If companies pass on the costs of tariffs to consumers, it could lead to inflationary pressures in the e-commerce sector, affecting not only prices but also consumer behavior. The long-term significance of increased prices may alter shopping habits, leading consumers to seek alternatives or reduce discretionary spending, thereby impacting overall economic growth. 7. International trade relations. The tariffs and the elimination of the de minimis exemption could strain U.S.-China relations further. The implications of such trade policies extend beyond immediate economic effects, potentially influencing diplomatic relations and international cooperation on various fronts. Understanding this context is vital, as trade wars can have cascading effects on global market supply chains and geopolitical stability. 8. Regulatory changes and compliance burdens. The shift in tariff policy may lead to increased regulatory burdens for e-commerce companies, who will need to navigate a more complex landscape of compliance and reporting. The significance of this lies in the potential for increased operational costs and the diversion of resources toward compliance efforts rather than innovation and growth. Smaller companies may find it particularly challenging to adapt, leading to further consolidation in the market. Conclusion. The Trump administration's recent tariff implementation and the elimination of the de minimis exemption are significant developments in U.S. trade policy that will have far-reaching consequences for e-commerce consumers and international relations. By focusing on these often overlooked aspects, stakeholders can better understand the complexities and potential ripple effects of these policy changes in the context of a rapidly evolving global economy. 1. Impact of the de minimis provision on e-commerce. The de minimis provision previously allowed packages valued under $800 to enter the U.S. without incurring tariffs. This exemption played a crucial role in the rapid expansion of Chinese e-commerce platforms like Temu and Shein, enabling them to offer significantly lower prices than traditional retailers. The sheer volume of de minimis shipments, which surpassed 1.3 billion in 2024, underscores its importance in facilitating trade and providing American consumers with affordable goods. The abolition of this exemption is likely to pressure these companies to raise prices, which could lead to a decline in consumer choice and affordability. 2. Economic implications and revenue generation. The termination of the de minimis exemption is framed as a means to generate additional tariff revenue for the U.S. government, as proponents argue that it would also help combat illegal drug trafficking, notably fentanyl. A senior administration official highlighted how the loophole made it easier for illicit goods to evade customs checks. This dual objective of raising revenue while addressing public health concerns showcases the complex motivations behind U.S. trade policy and the balancing act between economic growth and security issues. 3. Adaptation strategies of e-commerce giants. In anticipation of the new tariff regime, companies like Temu and Shein are already adapting their business models. Temu has begun shifting to larger shipments to U.S. warehouses to shorten delivery times and mitigate the impact of tariffs, while Shein has established distribution centers in the U.S. These proactive measures indicate that while the tariffs pose challenges, they also drive innovation in logistics and supply chain management among e-commerce platforms. The ability of these companies to pivot quickly may help them maintain competitiveness despite the changing regulatory landscape. 4. Shifting competitive dynamics in e-commerce. The new tariffs and the abolition of the de minimis exemption are likely to alter competitive dynamics within the e-commerce market. Traditional retailers and platforms like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy may benefit from the increased costs faced by Chinese competitors, with American consumers showing a willingness to pay for quicker delivery and potentially higher prices from domestic retailers. This shift could intensify competition within the U.S. market. The evolving landscape will require all players to reassess their strategies in terms of pricing, inventory management, and customer engagement to retain market share. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. This U.S. law raised tariffs on hundreds of imports, aiming to protect American industries during the Great Depression. It was intended to boost domestic production but resulted in retaliatory tariffs from other nations, leading to a significant decrease in international trade and worsening the economic downturn worldwide. 2. U.S.-China Trade War 2018-present. Initiated under the Trump administration, this series of tariffs and trade barriers aimed to address trade imbalances and intellectual property theft. The U.S. imposed tariffs on various Chinese goods, prompting China to retaliate with tariffs on American products. The trade conflict disrupted global supply chains and intensified economic tensions between the two nations, affecting numerous industries. 3. Whiskey Rebellion 1794. Although not a tariff in the traditional sense, the federal excise tax on whiskey created tensions between the U.S. government and frontier farmers. The tax was seen as unfairly targeting small producers, leading to protests and violence. The rebellion highlighted the challenges of enforcing federal tax laws in a newly formed country and the complexities of regional economic interests versus federal authority. The recent implementation of a 10% tariff on goods imported from China alongside the abolition of the $800 de minimis threshold signifies a pivotal shift in U.S. trade policy. This move, initiated by the Trump administration, aims to reshape the e-commerce landscape in the United States, particularly impacting Chinese e-commerce giants like Temu, Shein, and Alibaba's Taobao. This analysis will explore the potential future outlook and implications of these changes. Economic impact and market dynamics. 1. Increased costs for consumers. The removal of the de minimis exemption means that consumers will likely see higher prices for low-cost goods previously imported duty-free. This could lead to a broader inflationary impact as companies pass on increased costs to consumers, particularly affecting price-sensitive buyers who have gravitated towards budget retailers like Temu and Shein. 2. Adaptation of e-commerce strategies. E-commerce platforms will need to revise their business models. Companies like Temu and Shein have already begun adjusting by establishing U.S.-based distribution centers and increasing bulk shipments to minimize the impact of tariffs. This trend is expected to continue, with companies investing in logistics and infrastructure to enhance delivery speed and mitigate tariff costs. 3. Shift in competitive landscape. The tariff structure may inadvertently benefit established U.S. retailers like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, which possess the logistical infrastructure to absorb tariffs more efficiently. Amazon in particular could leverage its marketplace model to offer consumers competitively priced goods while ensuring compliance with new tariffs. Long-term predictions. 1. Market consolidation. The increased operational costs due to tariffs may lead to market consolidation, with smaller e-commerce players struggling to compete. This could result in a landscape dominated by a few major players who can effectively navigate the tariff system and maintain competitive pricing. 2. Regulatory changes and compliance, as the U.S. government continues to scrutinize trade provisions like de minimis. E-commerce platforms may face increased regulatory compliance costs. Companies will need to invest in legal and logistical frameworks to ensure adherence to evolving trade policies, potentially diverting resources from innovation and growth. 3. Consumer behavior shifts. As prices rise, consumer behavior may shift. Some consumers might revert to traditional retail channels or seek local alternatives to mitigate costs. Others may prioritize quality and brand reputation over low prices, particularly if the perceived value of Chinese imports diminishes in light of increased costs. Geopolitical considerations. 1. U.S.-China relations. The implementation of tariffs is likely to exacerbate tensions between the U.S. and China. As trade relationships strain, both countries may seek alternative markets and partnerships, leading to a realignment of global trade networks. This may also accelerate the decoupling of technology and supply chains between the two nations. 2. Potential retaliation. China may respond with its own tariffs or restrictions, impacting U.S. exports to China. This could lead to a tit-for-tat scenario, further complicating international trade dynamics and potentially harming U.S. businesses reliant on exporting goods to China. 3. Emerging markets. As U.S.-China trade dynamics evolve, there may be opportunities for emerging markets to fill the void left by Chinese products. Countries in Southeast Asia, for instance, may become more appealing sources for low-cost goods, leading to shifts in sourcing strategies for U.S. retailers. Conclusion. The implementation of a 10% tariff on Chinese goods and the abolition of the de minimis threshold mark a significant turning point for U.S.-China trade relations and the e-commerce landscape. In the short term, consumers may face higher prices, while e-commerce giants will need to adapt quickly to the new regulatory environment. Long-term predictions suggest a potential consolidation in the e-commerce market. Shifts in consumer behavior and broader geopolitical ramifications. As the landscape continues to evolve, stakeholders will need to remain agile and responsive to navigate the complexities of this changing trade environment.